Alright, welcome guys to your video lecture on climate change. So we're going to go into modules. We've talked a lot about air pollution and then going into greenhouse gases and how those are changing the way our atmosphere works. And now we're going to talk about how that is contributing to climate change and maybe what are some of the results of climate change. So your notes are right here. They look like this. They're in your notebook if you've got your notebook. But if you do not, here's an editable copy for you along with the lecture. Let's get started though. So climate change again is this idea that the earth is changing or the climate is changing in a way that is not normal. So the climate of the earth normally cycles about every 1,000 years through a warmer climate, maybe more than 1,000, every couple of 1,000 years through warmer climate to colder climate. Warmer climate, colder climate. But the thing is we're seeing it change in a way that we've never found evidence for before because we weren't around thousands of years ago. But we can tell through ice samples as well as other fossil evidence and any of our geological data that the climate is changing in a way that it's never changed before. It's getting warmer much faster than it normally does, basically. And a lot of that has to do with the greenhouse gas effect. We talked about the more greenhouse gases we have, the warmer our protective blanket is around us, making the climate more warm. Now here's what's going to happen as that climate starts to change though. So that's what we're looking at today. The very first thing we're going to see is an increase in the invasive species on Earth. So as climate changes, new species will be able to live in areas in which they are not native to. This can and most likely will disrupt the natural food web in the area, especially if there are no predators. So we're going to spend some time when we talk about biosphere discussing ecology and the normal food pyramid and food chain, and then how invasive species kind of wreck that. Basically, we're increasing the available habitat for species. So if the Earth warms, more tropical species can migrate north. But what happens to the more polar species though? Or our tropical marine mammals. So invasive species, this climate change can actually be a good thing for some of the species, like our tropical marine mammals who have a limited area in which they can live right now. Their area, or their range is what we call it scientifically, is going to increase, which is awesome for them. But our more polar species who need that colder climate, they're not going to do so well, nor are the species who still live in the area in which the invasive species is going. Invasive species will learn they're such a big issue because generally they don't have any natural predators, meaning there's nothing really keeping their population in check, and they can eat the food or eat too many of the native species, throwing that ecosystem out of whack. This is one of the ways that global climate change is going to affect the Earth. Another possible way is extinction. So we're going to see a lot of species start to become extinct. So as food availability decreases, some species are at risk of extinction. Let me fix that slide real quick so we can read what that says. Awesome. We are also decreasing the available habitat for some species. If the Earth warms and the ocean becomes more acidic, some species will have to move habitats or their range will be shrunk. Again, the shrinking of the range or the increase of invasive species can cause animals to go extinct because they don't have food. We're having more competition, and generally competition, if it's not balanced or we don't find a balance, then one species is probably going to end up, the population is going to go extinct, meaning there's no more of the species in a given area. But we can also see an extinction of a species overall, meaning that there will never be any more of that species on the Earth. So this is a big deal. And some people have less sensitively said, well, why do I care if a species goes extinct? You'll learn the more you study science and the more you study the Earth that everything is pretty cyclic and everything is pretty connected. So just because you don't think a species directly affects you, you never know what kind of impact it's going to have on the environment or your life overall until it actually happens. So it's a big deal that some of these species are going extinct. Next, we have more forest fires. So as climate increases in temperature, regions will become more dry and can lead to an increase in forest fires. Again, the hotter, the drier the climate, the more increased the likelihood and intensity, so more increased the fact that there will be forest fires, and more increase in the intensity in general of the forest fire. Some people might say that we're even seeing these effects today. If you think back to the forest fires of Australia that happened at the beginning of 2020 or mid 2020, they definitely were more intense than forest fires we have seen in the past, and that's because the climate's becoming drier and warmer, creating great conditions for forest fires. We're also going to see a melting of the ice caps. Rising temperatures have accelerated the melting of polar ice. This is an issue as well. While polar bears and other marine mammals can swim, they just like us breathe air and need to have pit stops as they travel. Another big thing is while some of these species, like this cute little seal right here, see if I can move this. Well, this cute little seal right here has no problem swimming using its flippers and getting around. It does need to stop swimming eventually, and again, it can't just stop swimming at the bottom of the ocean. It needs that air to breathe, so it's a big deal for them. Although our polar bears, so if you recognize how a seal swims, it swims kind of like what you would imagine a mermaid, nice and flowy. It uses those flippers. While polar bears are considered marine mammals, they do not have the swimming abilities that seals do. They swim much like we do, a nice little doggy paddle, and that is much less sustainable than our baby seals. So it's a bigger issue for our marine ursalids, I believe is the name of that bear right there. But you see, his swimming is much less effective than the seals, meaning that he can swim for a very short amount of time. So the melting of the ice caps really is a big deal for these polar bears. It's not only destroying where they live, but it's making it harder for them to survive in general. Good. Next issue that we're going to see is a rise of flooding, or rises of my sea, and an increase in flooding. As ice melts, sea levels rise, causing flooding, property damage, and new coastlines. So you can see just a general map over here. The University of Arizona published what they would suspect as the impact or the regions impacted by sea level rise. So if the sea level rose 1 meter, we would see a submersion of most of the, right there, that was the panhandle right here of Florida, some of the panhandle, a good portion of this peninsula of Louisiana, and you would see some of our coast of North Carolina impacted, especially up in here when you look into the Sound. Now, if we had an impact of 6 meters, we would see even further inland the impact of those sea levels, so that's where our coast would be. Good. So it's a huge issue there. You can see that while it might not impact us too terribly much in Bladen County with that Cape Fear River shooting out right in here, we could experience some of the issues as well. Not to mention our friends in Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, and any of our beaches would be destroyed. So that's an issue. Another effect of global climate change is higher temperatures, which can lead to more ocean evaporation, causing heavier rainfalls and snow, so we might get more severe weather. Does this mean more hurricanes? Yep. And we're already seeing the effects of this. We've seen an increase of hurricanes since the 1980s, both in severity, so how destructive they are, and frequency, how often they happen. This also means more flooding, droughts, and downpours. Why? Increased temperatures lead to increased evaporation, increasing the chances of having severe weather. And I think second to last, we've got heat waves and drought. So again, as you can imagine, with rising temperatures, we can have very, very high temperatures for days, heat waves in the summer, or even weeks. And then with our high temperatures, as they increase, we get more evaporation, leading to more droughts. What happens when the temperatures stay high? We have more evaporation, which again leads to more severe weather. Why? Again, an increase in temperature leads to an increase in evaporation, which can lead to more droughts or even severe rain and snow, depending on the region. So while we might have more severe weather in parts of the world, we might also have droughts in the other parts, and droughts, again, lead to forest fires as well. I think this is our second to last one. I was wrong. So another effect of climate change is going to be a shortage of food and water. So as climate changes, rising temperatures, droughts, and invasive species can affect our food and water supply. So we might get more pests in our agriculture field. It might be harder to irrigate our fields. We've already seen this happening as we're depending more and more on our groundwater and aquifers to water our crops instead of the natural rainfall. We might also introduce invasive species that weren't normally there that might like to feast on our food. Additionally, if you think of livestock and you're a meat eater, you might have an increase in issue finding your hamburger. It takes a lot of crops and water to create that hamburger. So we might see an issue on getting meat if you're a meat eater as climate continues to change. This really is the last one. I do believe we might have some bleached coral or the destruction of coral reefs altogether. As my ocean temperatures increase, that might affect the coral's food source, causing it to turn white. So that's not good. Generally, the bleaching of coral is because of the increased acidity of the ocean. Why should we care about coral reefs? A couple of reasons. One, they're an indicator of issues with the ocean. So if they're feeling the effects of climate change, other organisms can as well. And two, corals not only are beautiful, but they are a biological hotspot. They create habitats and mutualistic interactions to support a wide variety of organisms. Generally, healthy corals equals healthy ocean. Unhealthy corals equals an ocean that is having issues at the very least. If you look here, we've got a prediction of the coral reefs and their frequency in the coming years. So this was created in 2010, so we've got the little maps. These are little corals around Hawaii, South Florida, and Puerto Rico. This is what we've got right now, lots of coral reefs right here. It's predicted that in 2025 we're going to have even less reefs. We'll see even less in Florida and less in Puerto Rico until eventually maybe in the year 2100 we're going to see the decrease in coral so much that they might even be an extinct species. So again, that is an issue, something to be concerned about. This is the end of your video lecture. Email me with questions. Tomorrow we're going to look into more of the global effects of climate change. Until then, though, have a great day.